Greetings to everyone who is interested in or affected by sustainability. Imre Mayer is my name. I am a 49-year-old economist from Hungary. I would like to present sustainability in its entirety as I see it. Sustainability is a complex topic, and we can best approach it by focusing on fundamental connections, cause and effect relationships, logical chains, and contradictions. It is important to find and use the right definitions, as this greatly aids understanding. Accordingly, and given my limited linguistic abilities, I deliberately use simple language with the aim of presenting sustainability and related topics in a logical and clear manner. Sustainability is completely free of ideology, politics, value choices, personality, morals, and emotions. It describes logical cause and effect relationships in the service of comprehensive goal, our long-term survival. I present my own original thoughts and insights. I have not encountered a similar train of thought, either in detail or in particular in context. If any of these ideas, explanations, or connections are familiar to you from before or from elsewhere, please let me know at the email address in my contact details. In the video, after the introduction, I present sustainability, its basis, its goal, and talk about how we can understand it. The next chapter is the longest, and its topic is understanding our unsustainable establishment, what factors and processes divert us from sustainability. I devote a separate chapter to the fears and anxieties associated with sustainability. Finally, I say a few words about the difficulties of finding a solution, what is needed to find a solution, and whether a solution exists. I am aware that the lighting, sound, editing, and background are far from the usual or expected standards of our time. This is partly due to my limited skills and partly a conscious choice. Anyone who watches the video till the end will understand why. I have also edited together relevant clips for certain subtopics which are worth watching in addition to the full video. The links can be found in my contact details. These topics include the temporality of sustainability, the presentation of the self-centeredness that explains our unsustainable way of life, and the lack of sustainability that results from our maladjustment. There is no option to comment, so if you have any related announcements, questions, or comments, please write to my email address. Due to the complex nature of sustainability, there are no short answers to this topic. Anyone who gives a short answer to any related question is either missing something or wants others to ignore something. This is true of all similarly complex topics such as politics, economics, finance, society, demographic changes, healthcare, human relations, history, and social sciences. It is therefore particularly important that we listen to each other, take the time and energy to understand the connections and each other's point of view, and communicate honestly. We may be able to convince each other with volume or stubbornness in representing our points of view, but not our natural environment. We can think of sustainability as a framework. If we fit within it, it means that we are in balance in the short term. In the longer term, we will achieve balance if we reverse the effects of previous activities that fell outside the framework. A very basic, more general correlation that sustainability is that the state of imbalance causes change. If we are out of balance for any reason, change will occur, and the further we are from balance, the faster or more intense the change will be. The importance of sustainability cannot be overemphasized. In the medium term, it is the only meaningful consideration. Previously, there were several valid considerations even in the long term. But as time goes by and we fail to address sustainability adequately, it becomes increasingly important until eventually it becomes the only condition for our immediate survival in the short term. Sustainability is based on our dependence on the natural environment. Its goal is the long-term survival of the human race. Its means is the knowledge and understanding of our natural environment and thus within it, and on this basis, the adjustment of human activity to our dependence. We depend on our natural environment, on the existence and well-being of numerous species, and on our natural resources. By natural resources, I mean the state of our natural environment that is as free as possible from human intervention. The value of our natural resources is determined by how much other resources and energy we need to expend in order to return to a state free from intervention. Similarly, we can describe the deterioration of the state of our natural resources in terms of how much effort is required to return them to their previous state. Sustainability is a global issue that cannot be solved with local tools. When I say we, I mean all of humanity. I do this because our natural environment perceives us as a single species, no matter how self-centered we are and how little we think together as a community. By self-centeredness, I mean, in part, putting individual interest ahead of others even if causing them harm, and in part, common human goals that do not serve our survival while they distract our natural resources. Technology means changing our environment and our ability to do so. From a sustainability perspective, the change is the primary outcome, and its byproducts are tangible products, services, and easily usable energy sources. We tend to focus on the byproducts, and for us, changes to our environment are a side effect, even though from the perspective of our long-term survival, the opposite is true. Our natural environment is vast, so the effects of our actions on it appear with a delay of months, years, or even decades. This applies to both our destructive and restorative activities. From this perspective, it is essential that we pursue the latter with at least as much persistence as we do the former. Depending on when we reach equilibrium, we will need to clean up more and focus more on restoration, which will require more time, more energy, and more powerful technology. None of these are guaranteed to be available if we take too long to reach equilibrium. Sustainability is a complex and comprehensive set of goals and tools, a complete and holistic topic that requires our full attention. If anything else appears among the goals, then it is no longer about sustainability. This is especially true when economic goals come up alongside sustainability. We are putting our life on the line. Our survival is at stake, and we are facing a multitude of questions to which we have no answers. These are questions posed by our natural environment. It does not help us if we ignore the questions from the environment we depend on, or look for other questions instead and give otherwise excellent answers to them. Our current establishment has many tangible and excellent results. It is safe, comfortable, allows us to fulfill ourselves personally, is entertaining, and has led to enormous breakthroughs in science, technology, and society. At the same time, it has a huge downside. It is unsustainable. And it cannot be repaired or avoided. Therefore, we must fundamentally transform our establishment so that our activities and our lives can be sustainable. The Industrial Revolution had a huge impact on our economic establishment. It transformed the economy, technology, and science in many ways, one of the most fundamental changes being the emergence of separation. Separation, or the isolation of a phenomenon or activity, is a very effective tool for pursuing a specific limited goal or a narrow set of sub-goals. The clear observation of a phenomenon and thus its deep understanding or the purposeful and thus masterful performance of a single activity is typically the result of separation. At the same time, this limitation also applies to responsibility. Everyone primarily pays attention to their own narrow range of activities and takes responsibility for them, but not for the destruction of natural resources, even though it is very rare to find an activity that does not reduce the value of our natural resources. Another fundamental contradiction is that sustainability is a complex goal that cannot be achieved through simple, highly limited sub-goals. In a free market, supply and demand become balanced, but this provides no information about the emissions balance required for sustainability. Economically, it is optimal to achieve the best possible result from a given resource and to allocate the necessary resources optimally to achieve a given result. The former is sustainable, the other is the competitive one. If someone chooses the latter, those who choose the former will fall behind, so we cannot consider this a completely free choice between the two options. Those who do not follow the rules of market and competition will cease to exist within a short period of time. The market economy does not allow for alternatives because everything else is orders of magnitude less efficient, and in economic life, that is what matters. Similarly, we do not use the surplus energy resulting from increased efficiency in energy production or from new technologies to replace previous sources, but rather to create and satisfy new demand or to meet previously unsatisfied demand. Market competition does not create the communication and cooperation necessary to preserve the value of natural resources. In fact, it works against it. Market prices, which are one of the fundamental outcomes of the market economy, are not related to natural resources and do not convey any information about them. Economic decisions are made on the basis of market prices, and accordingly, even careful economic planning does not take into account the state of our natural resources or their depreciation. Market prices can be distorted by taxes and government's incentives for certain types of material or energy emissions. But on the one hand, this is very far from all types of human emissions that affect the state of our natural resources, and on the other hand, it promotes the primacy of the economy over our natural environment. Minor or major deviations in market prices cannot fill the gap caused by the lack of connection with our natural resources. It is not the level of prices that is inappropriate, but their very existence and their all-determining nature. Those who do not compete in the economy will be squeezed out and will have very limited access to economic resources. There is no accepted alternative mode of operation. Our establishment does not allow for deviation. Narrative is an effective tool. It can be used to sell stories, products, and companies, and its presence or absence can determine the outcome of elections. When we successfully influence others with narrative, it becomes reality. At the same time, it highlights and validates a point of view, whoever it may belong to, that is contrary to our situation, which depends on the natural environment and the complex issue of sustainability. In a dependent situation, turning our own point of view into reality is downright harmful and greatly worsens our situation. It is in our human nature to seek out the new, and our current economic establishment encourages this. We seek new answers to old questions, just as we constantly find new questions. So, until we provide a valid answer to the recurring question of whether our establishment is sustainable, we are moving further away from balance every day, increasing the likelihood of change every day, regardless of new answers and questions. We think in short-term goals, which does not help us to enforce sustainability or take it into account. Those who plan for the long term and limit their use of resources accordingly will inevitably fall behind in the competition, which is determined by spot prices, quarterly financial reports, annual dividends, and elections held every few years. The presence of our ego is strongly felt. It is one of the driving forces of the economy, and advertising leads to predictable behavior that is easy to reinforce and exploit. At the same time, our ego makes cooperation difficult, makes coexistence bitter, and by definition, our ego is the enemy of sustainability and wants to make others depend on us. The latter is particularly convenient and profitable in many ways, and it also provides a sense of security, but it elicits behavior that is opposite of what our dependence on nature would require. Our spirit and soul are complex, and we are familiar with those parts that can be exploited economically. We understand the other parts less well, so we cannot heal them to the same extent that we distract them. This leads to more and more mental and psychological illnesses and disorders, with an increasing number of lonely, aimless, and burnt-out people in all age groups. In general, few people with limited resources are researching our natural environment. We primarily collect knowledge that can be directly exploited. There is not enough time, money, or attention to increase knowledge that cannot be directly cashed in. There is too much money or value in general, but often we still don't feel it is enough. One of the best ways to make money is to increase the use of natural resources. We tend to focus on the value and usability of money, such as inflation, exchange rates, and trust in money or its issuer, while from a sustainability perspective, what matters is the creation of money and value, its physical or virtual production, which places a strain on resources, and its expenditure, which involves the use of natural resources. There is too much money, it can be easily converted into other things, our monetary system is very efficient, and almost everything can be bought. Too much money and value are attractive, desired by others as well, so we must protect it. Technological advances make available increasingly efficient methods of money transfer and redistribution, turning the basic preservation and protection of our assets into an increasingly complex and resource-intensive task. There is a well-established method for optimizing or reducing unit costs, which is to spread the costs not directly related to the production of a given product or service, such as development or investment costs, over as wide a base as possible. In other words, economies of scale, increasing the quantity produced. This practice clearly demonstrates self-centered thinking and the separation of limited responsibility from the impact on natural resources. From an economic and market perspective, minimizing unit costs is the most effective approach. This is rewarded by the market, it is easy to sell, and increasing volume is good for everyone individually, but is contrary to the principle of sustainability. We make decisions based on unit costs, while total emissions are what matter. There is a fundamental difference between natural and economic resources. We account for economic resources, but we actually impact natural resources without taking this into consideration. Economic resources are all available materials, energy, and direct services provided by nature. Natural resources are the proximity of our natural environment to a state free from human intervention. Accordingly, our natural resources are not to deplete, there is no bottom to the pit we can lean on. Our natural resources are deteriorating, first slowly, then in direct proportion to our emissions, and then accelerating until we reach a tipping point or breaking point where even a small amount of further deterioration will have magnitudes greater impact. Economic and natural resources are different, their value is different, they behave differently, we deal with the former, but the latter is what matters. Due to the vast size of our natural environment, our impact is delayed and not always easily recognizable. It is therefore easy to think that a given activity has no or little impact, and that it is not necessary to give it up in order to move closer to sustainability. We do not know how much time we have left before major problems arise. Even if collapse does not occur in the foreseeable future, the destruction and pollution that has accumulated so far will continue to grow at an accelerating rate, which we will have to deal with at some point. Sustainability means balance by a given level of pollution and destruction in the short term. We cannot allow this to continue indefinitely. It is like debt. If we can pay the interest, it is a kind of balance, but the principal has to be repaid as well. Demand creates supply. Demand is in no way linked to the state of our natural resources. Deterioration in the latter does not reduce demand. The central and decisive role of demand in economic life stands in stark contrast to the character and carrying capacity of our natural resources. Global problems cannot be solved locally. Many of us trust that the consequences of our unsustainable activities will not be unbearable for us personally, and this confidence is temporarily supported by the delay caused by the size of our natural environment. We do not believe that achieving sustainability is our responsibility, nor do we feel that we have the means to do so. Everyone will bear the consequences of our unsustainable way of life, and we all have responsibility to achieve sustainability. Armed forces are mostly legal actors under statal control, and their existence and development have been necessary and inevitable since the emergence of the first armed group. In terms of sustainability, armies operate in the following range when developing, manufacturing, maintaining, and using of weapons. Sustainability is the last consideration. Sustainability is not a consideration. The goal is to take away, render unusable, or destroy resources available to the enemy. The goal is making sustainability and life for the enemy impossible. Our establishment is not sustainable even if most actors act carefully and lawfully. In addition, there are many such activities and situations in life where sustainability is not a consideration. For the vulnerable, the dependent, those involved in the grey and black markets, criminals, armed organizations serving any purpose, and terrorists, sustainability is the last thing on their minds if they are not actively working against it. Technological progress can lead to sustainability, but the question is how long it will take. Furthermore, technology-based sustainability assumes that we will increase our knowledge not only in the exploitable territory, but it is highly questionable given our current establishment. Technology has a role to play in halting the depreciation of natural resources, but it is extremely risky to rely on it. It is important to understand that we cannot achieve sustainability through self-centered thinking. It is easy to think that, thanks to our technical, economic, and social development, sustainability can be achieved with little effort and sacrifice, and that we are free to choose from among solutions that are convenient or profitable for us and achieve sustainability. Narrative is an effective tool for steering our thinking and public discourse in this direction. With self-centered thinking, we do not understand the problem or its depth, and we do not accept our dependent situation or the needed actions that result from it. Fear and anxiety are not a problem insofar as if we were not afraid of anything, our unsustainable activities would not cause pain or hardship, and the force driving us towards sustainability would be much weaker. There are several solutions to anxiety. At the latest, when disaster strikes, our anxiety is instantly blown away by the many immediate and urgent tasks required for our survival. What lies ahead? We don't know, and it's not my intention to scare anyone or predict the future. Here is a brief and incomplete list of what we have seen so far. Increasingly extreme weather events, ecosystems approaching their limits, wave of species extinction, declining birth rates and aging population in consumer societies, plastic pollution present and accumulating everywhere and in everyone, easier outbursts of epidemics, the spread of invasive species, an uncontrolled arms race, and dwindling drinking water supplies. These are the consequences of our unsustainable way of life, and they are also hindering us on the path to sustainability. We do not know what else awaits us, either in terms of the nature of the changes or their novelty, and this unknown set of dangers is rightly frightening for many people. An important question is when we will change our unsustainable way of life. Due to the inertia of our natural environment, it will take decades before the effects become meaningful. It is not only important whether we achieve sustainability in time, but also at what level the balance will be established and how much accumulated pollution and damage we will have to manage, neutralize, and reverse. As long as we focus most of our attention on ourselves, our economy, and our human problems, we hardly notice the warning signs of our natural environment, even if they are becoming increasingly powerful. Due to our exponentially growing emissions, the time available for intervention is decreasing exponentially. We do not know how much time we have left, which can be interpreted egocentrically as meaning that we still have time since there is no obvious catastrophe in sight, or anxiously as meaning that this uncertainty is particularly frightening. When it becomes undeniably clear to everyone that we are in serious trouble, either we will be too late to change our ways due to the delay caused by the size of our natural environment, or we will have to make very drastic changes in a very short period of time. This suggests that the anxious interpretation and change as soon as possible is the way forward. The self-centered question arising from anxiety is what will happen to me. This is a natural thought, but from the perspective of sustainability, the question of what will happen to us is orders of magnitude more important. Due to the nature of our economic establishment, which makes alternatives impossible, and the unanswered changes that are already noticeable, there are no long-term methods of individual survival, and it is impossible to give a reassuring answer to the question of what will happen to me. However, we can answer the question of what will happen to us, because we have means to change current processes, and the goal of sustainability is collective long-term survival. Even when we are anxious, we can still use or even distract our natural resources. In this respect, anxiety is not a special condition. Similarly, anxiety does not exempt us from the consequences and effects of inevitable changes. Generally speaking, we cannot escape trouble by explaining or justifying what we do and why we do it, why it is good for us, or why we cannot act differently. In this case, we will know why we are dying out, but this will not change the threat or reality of our extinction. Our current system is unsustainable and cannot be improved, as the fundamental characteristics that give our system its advantages are also the cause of its unsustainability. Our current system cannot remain as it is. Either we find a solution for sustainability and then reduce our destruction of resources in a planned and controlled manner, or we cross the tipping points at an unpredictable time, losing technologies and human lives, after which we will have to solve many more and much more pressing problems with far fewer resources and in a much shorter time. Any regulation, definition, or practice that does not take into account our dependence on the natural environment is misleading and does not serve the purpose of our survival. This is especially true in cases where the basis is explicitly or implicitly self-centered, economically centered, such as growth, profit, or competitive advantage, or designates a human goal that is not the long-term survival of our species. What is the alternative? We are currently not on a sustainable path, and we have no meaningful response to the questions raised by our environment and mediated by me. Those who argue against this should outline a realistic alternative in its entirety. Our current activities are neither sustainable nor improvable, so they cannot be accepted as a basis for reference. There are better alternatives for individual elements in any complex system, but when it comes to sustainability, only complex, complete establishments can be validly compared, not individual parts. Anyone who wants to argue and brings up points that are not based on the fundamentals, that unsustainable activity causes imbalance, which leads to change, that we are dependent on our natural environment, that sustainability is a global problem to which we cannot provide a local solution, will be ignored. Just as we cannot convince our natural environment with self-centered or illogical arguments. If we argue for what reason a particular activity is unsustainable, unnecessary, or impossible to continue sustainably or to give up, then we should present an argument that holds water even after a major disaster or collapse has occurred, or at least provide sufficient consolation that it was worth risking collapse for. The same argument sounds different from the comfort of our armchair when we determine the narrative and evaluate ourselves than it does after the collapse, after the destruction of industries, countries, basic infrastructure and technologies, or after the deaths of millions or billions. There is at least one solution in the short term and at least two options in the long term. If this video gets enough views, I will share my suggestions on how we can achieve sustainability. On the one hand, it is important that there should be sufficient interest in this interpretation of sustainability, which accepts our dependence on nature, whether it is my own view or comes from other sources. On the other hand, it is important to recognize and accept that our current establishment, i.e., our conflict-based international system, our competition-based market economies, our self-centeredness, and our resulting maladjustment is fundamentally unsustainable, and so far there is no meaningful or workable solution to this. Thirdly, it is also important to understand what has been said here in sufficient depth, otherwise no one will understand, let alone accept, the proposed solutions. We have reached the end of the video. May there be more understanding. I hope we hear from each other again.